Having worked with ecosystems like, Paris, Milano, Lisbon, South Africa, or Cape Town in particular, right? Many of those ecosystems are looking at Israel as a model and try to replicate that. I think all of them, without any, they said probably that they're looking to be the next startup nation, right?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today I'm being joined by Raz Bachar, Global Lead for Startup Emerging Technologies and Managing Director of Israel at Microsoft for Startups. He is a business development professional and strategist in generating growth for tech services and products. Before Microsoft, Raz built and drove the growth for AWS across several startup ecosystems in Europe, Middle East, and Africa through strategic planning, community building, and partnerships with VCs and accelerators. Raz Bachar, how are you? Thank you for joining me.
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. Raz, you have such an incredible history within the startup ecosystem, and you've worked with incredible companies like AWS, where you were head of startup business development of EMEA, and now most recently managing director of Microsoft's global industry lead at Microsoft Microsoft for Startups, and I'm excited to hear about your experience working with the startup ecosystem as an incubator from a corporate, but also as a mentor for startups and watching them grow, and how you even got to be a mentor for startup incubation, because that, if I follow the trend of what you did before, that's not a trivial thing to get to. So share with me a little bit about your own journey and how you got into this world.
Sure. So happy to again. Thank you for having me. I will say that again. Basically, I haven't planned anything, from career perspective. But I'm an engineering background. I had my own cloud integration company before cloud was a thing. Ended up shutting this down. Joined HP for a little while. Basically, at that point, I kind of got discovered. All of the sales world, doing a role of Razs storage, and then I kind of relocated from Israel to Luxembourg to basically to kickstart AWS operation in Israel for the first time. The nice story is that I don't have every single CIO in Israel basically threw me out from the room, trying to explain to them what is cloud computing back then in 2011 2012. So
wow.
It was a crazy period, basically just evangelizing cloud computing. After Amazon and AWS opened the offices back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, I stayed back then. I saw a great opportunity, kind of working with startups, which is again what I love more than anything else, right? And I ended up opening a new operation, which was the startup business development team for AWS, and led that across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I think the fascinating thing that role kind of taught me is the fact that we always kind of consider ourselves the startup nation, and we sometimes tend to overuse that phrase. But having worked with ecosystems like Paris, Milano, Lisbon, South Africa, or Cape Town in particular, right? Many of those ecosystems are looking at Israel as a model and try to replicate that. I think all of them, without any, they said probably that they're looking to be the next startup nation, right? Each one, kind of try to fine tune their unique properties and offering to their audience, to their ecosystems, to the developers, to investors. But it's fascinating to see how much respect and appreciation there is towards the Israeli ecosystem. Following that, I kind of relocated back.
Wait, Raz, I have to stop you on
yeah?
that note because I think it's interesting.
Sure.
You're talking about the respect that other countries are perhaps giving to the startup nation. I think this is something that's actually really, something to dwell on for a second, because you've gotten to experience the startup incubation across the Middle East, Europe, and Eastern Africa. You mentioned, correct?
Yeah.
And so, tell me a little bit more about this Startup Nation as a model, and what you learned from watching startups grow in these different ecosystems, and how perhaps things that we may be taking for granted here in the Startup Nation that you've come to realize that it's actually pretty quite special.
So I will say that again, like these are kind of things that we already got used to, right? But in the end, like when you look at things like what happened in Portugal or Lisbon in particular, right? So it was kind of the perfect storm. The fact that you had engineers which are relatively affordable, right? They were in the same time zone as the UK and relatively close to New York or to the even the West Coast, right? More and more like government programs actually made it like more attractive for investors to invest in those kind of in the specific ecosystem. In parallel to that, there were incentives for researchers to basically take their IP that they created and develop it to something. And then the nice thing is that like all of those components were were incubated separately until there were a couple of accelerators, and that was the most amazing thing. Which we didn't experience that in Israel, because in Israel we had the Yozma initiative, by the government. It was kind of forced top down to some extent, right? But over there, you saw how it started from the field, and basically being propped from the cliche sentence of community managers, right? Just grouping together to create a consortium and just bringing to the table, the government representative, the academy, the investors, the student universities, right? And having spin that wheel for a couple of months or even like a couple of years, just doing it in the most Spartanian way that you could imagine. Suddenly you saw startups like Unbubble or I forgot the name of the luxury brand. It will come to me in a second. But like there were a couple of really, really high potential startups that were started there and grew, eventually reaching kind of the unicorn status, exit, and now because of that exit, like few other startups have been created, and then on top of all of that, Web Summit, which was kind of the how to say it, like the
Holy Grail.
Not the Holy Grail. Let's call it like the Black Swan, like in a positive way, right? That suddenly had to shift location and got shift from Ireland to Portugal. Suddenly made it rose that ecosystem to the world stage, right? And I will say that in Israel we tend to speak a lot about Tel Aviv, right, as kind of the first place. But I definitely think that the group and organization from Made in Jerusalem, for example, this is like the exact same model that I'm seeing, kind of being built to incubate and to grow new ecosystems all across those regions.
So incubating new.
Sorry for the monologue.
That was awesome. Incubating new ecosystems, incubating new startups. Talk to me a little bit about what you're doing today with Microsoft, the transition from AWS, and how do you envision Microsoft for Startups program?
Perfect. So within Microsoft for Startups, like we're covering startups all across their life cycle, from the two developers in the garage to the unicorns of the world, working with all of the ecosystem partners like accelerators, VCs, startup organization like the expert institutes or Startup Nation Central, right? So all of those organizations. Now we have obviously different offerings and programs to different startups in different stage, even to individual developers or entrepreneurs. I will say that probably like the best value proposition that we have is to connect startups with either our ecosystem partners, right? So we're actually doing like deal flow sharing with investors and accelerators that we're working with. The other one is the fact that we're trying to connect them to the Microsoft customers, and we have dedicated programs to do that at scale and efficiently. And then the last thing, and again, this is something that's been like an amazing experience, like to see those mini successes over time. Is connecting startups with the product groups, right? Which again, some of the most difficult thing for early stage startup is they especially as they get started, they suddenly come and say, I'm going to sell to the biggest bank in the world, the biggest insurance organization in the world, right? And like 99.9% of the times they are way over their head, and eventually they're getting disappointed. And I am seeing more of those POCs, and an extreme level of openness from the product groups and from the business development manager and from other functions in the organization. Like even if you look at our legal and finance and HR, right? Like all of them are excited about working with startups and supporting entrepreneurs, whether it be as giving them the insight that they have, because again, these are people that's been in industry for a long time, and obviously they're kind of at the front end of some of the most complex organizations that there is, right? And either they share their knowledge as mentors, as experts, or they even give them ability to integrate to some extent to their product groups, right? If it makes any sense.
Of course. And so can you give me some examples of how you've been working with startups and how they're actually getting integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem through this program? And it sounds like a lot of this is based on also a lot of trust and a relationship that is building over time. It's not just here get credit for Microsoft Azure. It's much more about, okay, here's get integrated into our ecosystem, and we can bring our knowledge and expertise into working with these multinationals to help you bring your product to fruition, right?
Right. So I'll say two things, right? Like one of them is that I'll actually leverage the opportunity to mention about another activity that we have, which is kind of the Microsoft Accelerator, which kind of its new brand, which is the AI for Good. It's an accelerator for early stage startup, powered by AI with impact-oriented solutions. And last year we actually won, the best accelerator award in Israel, right? So again, it was a humbling experience, let's say, to get the recognition for that category, not for the regular impact category. So I think that says a lot. And just to give you an example from that program, right? So we had last year a company named Right Here, right? And they have a solution that, or even Pecan that introduced us. But last year we had a startup called Right Here, and they have an indoor navigation system for people with blind imperative. And beyond the part of the acceleration program, again, kind of with the mentoring, the coaching on the business side, we supported them on the technical side. Just leveraging the technology and the Microsoft technical resources. Beyond that, again, like we've made a lot of effort on the joint go-to-market activities, and I think like the cherry at the top was the fact that we love their solution so much that we actually prop them internally into Microsoft, and Microsoft actually became their customer, ending up with having their solution kind of deployed, in the Microsoft campus in Tel Aviv and in Herzliya, right? And that's kind of a win-win-win situation because basically they get like another customer and a great brand. We get to support our startups, and either our employees with that relevant disability or visitors to the campus get to have an amazing experience, right? So I think this is like a huge example. The other thing that I'll add up is that, and again, this is it's some education that we still need to do for the ecosystem, because of some of the history that we have, is that we're not only kind of representing Azure, right? So obviously, it's a very well-known brand. Again, as a technology company, it makes sense it will represent kind of the cloud offering. But we also look at the other suite of solutions that Microsoft have, right? So if you look at LinkedIn, GitHub, Xbox, Office 365, right? So, and the list is long. And again,
A $2 trillion company, I believe, as of today or yesterday.
exactly. And I will say that again, kind of in the second hat that I have around kind of working in the cross industry vertical, I've been exposed to the Microsoft biology department and the robotics and the space division, right? And these are like amazing projects that Microsoft is taking part of, which is going to revolutionize in the way that we'll behave in our daily life, right?
Amazing. And so, the whole ecosystem today is, it's very competitive, not just competitive between startups, but also between venture capital investors. And I'm sure that also within, accelerators and such programs that are looking to get a strong relationship with the startups, early on so that they can continue working with them as they progress. How do you experience this, cooperation right now within the ecosystem, and how do you see the balance shifting in the last few years?
So overall, the more help startup can get, the better, right? Like it's just like increasing the pie. I think that especially these days, we see more support, aka funding and talent being kind of how should I like getting sucked to the unicorns of the world, to the large scale-up companies, the charging ponies, right? Like that's the trending name. And as part of that, I will say that early stage startups and early and first time founders probably need as much help as they can get now more than ever. And again, any help that we can get, or even like cross collaboration with other vendors, this is something that we see as a plus, because again, in the end, like it comes down to meeting the people, getting to know them, and as you mentioned before, like building that trust and relationship is more important than anything else. Again, because as they're getting started, they're not kind of they're not generating any significant workloads, right? It's something that will come later on, but I definitely think that the value and the relationship and the trust that you build is something that can sustain for a really long time.
Amazing. And so your day to day, as you're working with all these different startups and you're moving, where do you fit into this, right? So, as the managing director of this program and thinking through these accelerators and this part of the ecosystem, how does your day to day actually look like?
Well, I'm lucky enough that every day is different, right? Especially like kind of in a COVID or in a hybrid kind of model that we're in. I will say that again, I'm splitting my time between obviously getting to like having just to meet as many founders as possible. Like on average, I'm seeing between 800 to 1,000 startups per year, right? Which is enough. Again, to get a perspective, but also this is what I enjoy doing. The other part is again kind of working through some of the operational heavy lifting that we have, kind of running the programs that we have, and then the last part is obviously Microsoft is a huge organization, and for better and for worse, we need to manage the internal resources, the internal expectations, right, the internal stakeholders, and this is also something that needs to be done more often than I expect. I find how do things kind of correlate together, because again, when I invest in learning more about the organization, finding about a new product group, and suddenly I remember I met a couple of months ago that can have a great fit to that specific need that they raised because of a meeting. That's another kind of win-win situation that we can generate, right? So.
Amazing, just amazing. Raz, thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate it. I have a few more questions before I let you go, and I want to take you back to your childhood, and I want to ask you what really fascinated you as a kid, whether it's a subject in school or a passion hobby. What was it?
Honestly, I think just I don't know, spending time outside of the house as much as possible, just being in the nature, walking, traveling. Like that's the thing that I enjoy the most, right?
Very cool. And an inspiration today, something that in the day-to-day inspires you, whether it's something that's happening, some person that is living.
So over here, sorry for the cliche answer, but my kids, right? So again, I have like a 4-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son, and again, obviously, since they came to the world, I definitely saw kind of a shift on moving away with just kind of the slogan of working to make the world a better place, to actually try to be a little bit more purposeful with regards to how and where I invest my time, and it's obviously let's say it makes me a little bit more biased towards startups that I enjoy helping more than others. So I will say with that.
Right. And 3 words you would use to describe yourself.
I'll use a sentence for that, but it's 3 words, so it's a leap of faith. I definitely think that, again, many times in the business that we're in, there's only as much that we can learn, data that we can look at, and due diligence that we can do. In the end, you need to take the leap of faith in order to make sure that the person on the other end, can deliver on whatever it is that they're doing, or even if it's something informal that you agree on, you need to take the leap of faith for them to meet their promise or anything like that, right? And especially when you're working with early stage founders, when you invest resources, invest your time, so yeah.
Amazing. Raz, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. Best of luck with Microsoft for Startups, continuing to make it what sounds like an incredible program, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Dude, thank you so much.